From returning from retirement to completing his blood oath and being excommunicated, Jonathan Wick, aka Baba Yaga, aka the Boogeyman, is back with his fourth and possibly final chapter with John Wick Chapter 4. What is going on to all my John Wick fans out there, and welcome back to my channel, MovieFiles. Today we will be discussing the plot of the film John Wick Chapter 4. We'll be talking about that ending, the post-credit scene, and what next for this franchise, all in today's breakdown. But first, start leaving your thoughts on the film from your favorite moments and your favorite scenes, your new favorite characters, and what did you all think about the ending, the post-credit scene, and what are you all excited to see next within the John Wick universe? Let's talk about that in the comments below. And if you all enjoyed today's video, consider liking this breakdown, sharing today's video, and consider subscribing to the channel. With all that being said, full spoilers ahead. Now, before we break down the final 45 minutes of this film, which was absolutely insanity, let's go back to where it all began with the opening sequence, where we see John Wick traveling to Morocco and killing the Elder, who was the only individual above the high table. Now, before John Wick kills the Elder tells Wick the only way John Wick will ever have freedom and peace is in death. Now, that line right there, death, is something we see repeatedly being told to Wick by various characters in this new chapter and could be looked at as foreshadowing for Wick's fate later in this film. There are so many interesting themes we see John Wick tackling with in this chapter, as he even wonders if he'll ever have his freedom and if he'll ever be at peace. As we witness John Wick on this journey of repentance and forgiveness, as he's been on this path of vengeance, and death has followed him and impacted others, as we see that come to head in this film. It's been a couple weeks since I've seen this film, but I really come to appreciate what the film was doing, and particularly how they challenged John Wick, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally, but also spiritually, as we see him seeking purpose besides violence. As John Wick sets himself on this path of the circle of hell in Dante's Inferno. As we are introduced to our main big bad of the film, Marquis, who is a senior member of the High Table and is appointed to kill John Wick by any means necessary. Now, while he might have been a bit over the top at points, I thought he fit perfectly in this world, and personally, I really enjoyed Bill Skarsgård's performance as he's given all this power while preparing to make changes within the High Table. Now, to punish Winston for not killing John Wick in the last chapter, Marquis strips him of his duties as manager and destroys his Continental, but to make matters even worse, he kills Charon, which made me absolutely hate this character within minutes after meeting him. Now, this scene was already upsetting because we lost such a great character, but now it hits even harder after recently losing the actor in the role, Laurence Reddick. As Marquis travels to Paris to enlist Kane, played by the amazing Donnie Yen, and my favorite character in this film, as he plays a blind, retired, high-table assassin, but also an old friend of John's, who is hired to kill John Wick after Marquis threatens to murder Kane's daughter, which is what motivates him to saying yes. Now, throughout the rest of the film, we witness not only some of the best action scenes in the series, but some of the best action we'll probably see all year, from the Osaka Samurai influence phenomenal sequence where we're introduced to some new amazing characters. For example, we have Mr. Nobody, the tracker, and his killer dog, and I really enjoyed Mr. Nobody. He did grow on me because at first I thought he was a little bit weird, as we have him having his journal, which he has all these interesting notes with the bounty of $50 million on John Wick's head. And it appears to me that he was a fanboy of John Wick. Let me know if you all thought the same thing. We meet the manager of the Osaka Continental, Shimazu, who was a complete badass, but unfortunately is killed by Kane, and his daughter Akira witnesses this, which connects to the post-credit scene, which we'll be discussing a little bit later in this breakdown. From there, we see John Wick travel to Berlin and attempt to make amends to his crime family in order to receive a new crest, marking his membership to the syndicate, which his adoptive sister Katia agrees to do so in exchange for John Wick killing the German High Table senior who murdered her father, which we see John Wick do. This all leads to the climactic conclusion in Paris, but before we get there, just backtracking a bit, John Wick did travel to New York earlier in the film where he talks to Winston, who lets John Wick know a little bit more information about Marquis and what he's all about, but he also tells him that if he manages to kill Marquis, the High Table would simply replace him and John Wick will be started from scratch. So he suggests to John Wick to challenge Marquis to a duel, which is the old ways, and if he wins, he'll be able to be set free from his obligation to the High Table. John eventually gets his request for the duel accepted by Marquis, and Winston asks for the terms that he be reinstated as the manager after his Continental is rebuilt. Now we see Marquis again agrees to these terms, but he throws in his own monkey wrench as he nominates Kane to fight in his place. Now the duel is set to take place the following sunrise, and if a minute late, John Wick and Winston will be executed. We see the Bowery King heads to Paris to assist Wick with providing him with a new weapon and a new ballistic suit, because he tells him you have to look good for either going to get married or get buried, as Marquis attempts to prevent John Wick from arriving to the duel by placing a $40 million hit on his head. From there, we get one of the best car chase sequences I've ever seen, to seeing John Wick fighting off what seemed to be an endless amount of assassins on his way to the duel, and we get one of the best moments with that bird's eye view camera shot of John Wick going through the church with his flame shooting shotgun, which was absolutely mind-melting. During all this chaos, we see Mr. Nobody deciding to help Wick even after being assigned to kill him, because John Wick saved Mr. Nobody dog from being killed, which to me was a nice callback to the original John Wick. Now, Kane also helps John Wick fighting his way to the staircase leading to the duel, which was one of the most entertaining and exhausting scenes in the best way possible in this movie, as with the help of Kane and Mr. Nobody, John and Kane reach the summit in time to save Winston. Now we see the two of them dueling with their pistols as Kane takes a few shots and lands on John, and John does the same to him, all within the first 2 rounds. As we see, John Wick is badly wounded, leaving Marquis thinking that he can personally execute John Wick for the final round, but John has a surprise for him as he didn't fire his gun yet, leaving him to shooting and killing Marquis. As the Harbinger declares him free of his debt to the High Table, we see Kane is free as well, and Winston gets his Continental back. We finally see John Wick, who is now a free man who is completely spent and tired. He walks over to the staircase and he dies peacefully due to his wounds, where he finally, as a loving husband, is reunited with his Helen, or does he? Now let's assume he's dead. I think it's a nice idea that we get to see, after witnessing John Wick taking all those lives throughout the franchise, we see John Wick saving his friends Winston and Kane, which to me seemed like a very poetic way for him to go out. Now, as we see Winston and King talking about if John Wick made it to heaven or hell, I thought it was so interesting that we got to see John Wick's dog from chapter 2 and 3 perk its ears up, which made me think that he sensed John Wick somewhere, maybe watching this funeral. Because think about it like this. Even though, yes, John Wick was freed of the High Table, you would have to imagine that there is probably someone out there, after all the bodies that we've seen John Wick accumulate, someone probably still wants him dead, so it would seem like a smart idea for him to fake his death. But also, after falling from buildings and getting hit by cars multiple times and being shot at, I'm a firm believer that between Paris and New York, we don't know what happened to John Wick's body, so is he really in that coffin? I don't know. But if you all remember, initially the plan was to shoot John Wick chapter 4 and 5 back to back, but the pandemic forced a change of plans, which may explain why this chapter is almost 3 hours long, because maybe his death was added into this chapter instead of for the 5th one, which goes back to me saying, if this is indeed the death of John Wick, I would be okay if this is the last time we see this character in the present timeline, because to me, after 4 chapters of non-stop action, incredible world building, incredible supporting characters, I think this more than solidifies John Wick as one of the greatest action characters of all time. But let me know in the comments if you believe this is the end of Wick, and if he is dead, if we saw him die, or if you're like me and thinking that he might have faked his death and he's still alive out there, and the only people that know that is King and Winston. Let me know your thoughts on that in the comments below. But that brings us to the post-credit scene, where we see Kane, now a free man of all his obligations of the High Table, with flowers in hand and excited to see his daughter, only for Akira to finding him and approaching Kane with a knife, seeking her vengeance for her father's death. Now, something this film did beautifully to me was showing the various characters dealing with not only legacy, but also being known as one thing, but wanting to be remembered for something else. For example, we had John Wick, the Baba Yaga, the killer, the boogeyman, known to others, but to John Wick, he wanted to be remembered as a loving husband. Now, connecting that to the legacy side of the story, we saw the various different fathers and daughters and their relationships, and seeing the fathers being killed and having their daughters like Akira seeking out vengeance for losing her dad. And the same thing could be said about Katia, who lost her father and had vengeance by sending John Wick to killing his killer. So now the question is, did Akira manage to kill Kane, or did he manage to stop her? And we might see a spinoff in which she's going to be on a hunt to killing Kane, but also might want to take out the high table for ultimately being the ones who sent Marquis in the position of killing her father in the first place. I really enjoyed both of those characters, and I personally wouldn't mind seeing more of them in the future. Which, speaking of the future, that brings me to my next point, which is what I would like to see next in this series. Now, I personally think the franchise has done such a great job of world building and introducing us to so many different supporting characters who I would like to see maybe get a spin-off film or a television series. For example, what about Sophia's character, who was rumored to have a spin-off at one point? I love Halle Berry. I love what she brought to John Wick Chapter 3. I was hoping she made an appearance in this one, so could she have a future? I would be interested in seeing more of her. But also, a character who I really enjoyed in John Wick Chapter 4 was Mr. Nobody. So could we maybe get a spin-off of Mr. Nobody meeting Bob Odenkirk's Hutch, aka Nobody, and get a crossover, which was rumored in the past, and I really enjoyed Mr. Nobody, who's supposed to get a sequel sometime in the coming years. But let me know if you all would like to see that crossover. Which also, speaking of crossover, what about the rumored Atomic Blonde crossover, which was supposed to happen? And also, where is Atomic Blonde sequel, which was supposed to be picked up on Netflix? So let me know what you all would like to see as far as crossovers go. But one more little spin-off or idea that I would be into, which was, if you all know, there was a John Wick secret prequel idea, which would have explored John Wick's origins, his parents, where he came from, but more importantly, we would have saw the impossible task that John Wick completed before marrying Helen and retiring. So share in the comments what spin-offs or prequels or crossovers would you all like to see in the comments below. Now that brings me to my final topic, which leads us to the confirmed projects within the John Wick universe. So first, we have the rumored and now confirmed to be coming out later this year, and that is the Continental, which is the prequel spin-off miniseries starring Mel Gibson, which is supposed to give us a origin story of when Winston came to be a manager of Continental. It's going to take place in New York in the 70s. So to me, that sounds so interesting because obviously I love the Continental. I love the underground assassins world that they introduced us to. So I would think that's a great way to not only expand on all the different groups and all the different Continentals out there, but more importantly, this could be a great show to introduce us to the mystery of the high table. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what that series is all about. Let me know if you all are excited about the Continental in the comments. But as far as movies go, as far as confirmation, we do know that the Ballerina starring Ana de Armas will be coming out maybe later this year or maybe at the beginning of next year. We'll be seeing the ballerina who's also seeking her own vengeance and hunting down the murderers of her family. Now, the film was supposed to take place between the events of John Wick Chapter 3 and before John Wick Chapter 4, and we do have confirmation that Winston and John Wick will be having a smaller role in the film. So I'm really looking forward to the ballerina. I'm a big fan of Ana de Armas. I thought she was great in the James Bond latest film to show us as an audience that she can kick some butt. So I'm really excited to see what her story is all about, what other supporting characters will be involved in her story, what characters have we met besides Winston and John Wick will appear in her film, and will it set the stage for a ballerina meeting some other characters leading into a John Wick Chapter 5. So let me know if you all are excited about the Continental and if you all are excited about the ballerina. So there you have it. We broke down the film's plot. We talked about the ending, the post-credit scenes. I shared with you all what spin-offs or crossovers I would like to see, as well as talking about the confirmed projects within the John Wick universe. So before we end this video, I did want to take a moment to say rest in power to the incredible Lance Reddick, who passed away at the age of 60 on March 17th, 2023. So if you all enjoyed today's video, please consider liking, sharing, commenting your thoughts in the comment below, as well as join the community by subscribing to the channel. You all are awesome. Be safe, and we'll see you all on the next video.